Hi folks, I'm here in Montreal, in Peel Street here in Montreal. I just came from the Allen Institute where the Rockefellers carried out their notorious MK Ultra experiments under CIA direction. And I believe Oswald was weaponized as a Manchurian candidate. And their research there, the research in Montreal, as according to the good Dr. Gottlieb, said they were trying to develop a weapon system of Manchurian candidates. And I believe Oswald was part of that, was being weaponized, as was Sirhan Sirhan and Squeaky Fromm, who tried to assassinate Gerald Ford. And Sirhan Sirhan, well, he got blamed for killing JFK. And, of course, Oswald, I don't think he ever really pulled the trigger, but I think he was weaponized by the, ran a think tank to be a weapon to kill. Actually, I believe he was originally weaponized to kill, or be part of a plot to kill Vice President Richard Nixon, because Nixon was the communist red baiter, and Oswald was sent to Russia to pretty much adopt the communist Soviet style political ideology. That was all a front, I believe. But this building here, cut to the chase here, this used to be, this is like gangster headquarters, gangster central. This was the Bronfman building, Seagram building. During Prohibition, the Bronfman family, which owned Seagram's, which is of course an alcoholic spirit, made a fortune during Prohibition. They were smuggling their alcoholic beverage, their spirits, across into the United States, because they're in Prohibition. And at that time, any of these high-class spirits and alcohol beverages brought massive premiums. Now, people paid a premium to get the products, so the gangsters made a premium selling the products. Well, the Bronfmans, this actually is owned by McGill University. The Bronfmans donated to McGill University. And McGill University owns the Allen Institute. Well, they're well affiliated with McGill University, that did the MK Ultra experiments using LSD and mind control. And actually, their victims were unwittingly used. They had no idea they were having LSD injected into their systems, and what else, other horrors they were subjected to by the Rockefellers. But the Bronfmans are really the top financial bosses of McGill University. You studied the history of the college. Yeah, these people made money creating pain and death, and now they're all affiliated with America's greatest universities. So Rockefellers control a network of universities, which have been all purpose now, been all converted to do one thing. Basically install to be used as devices to install the Rockefellers as supreme dictators of the planet and reduce all human beings to farm animal status. Originally, these schools, all these prestigious universities had a religious affiliation, but then Andrew Carnegie changed that. So all these universities, they pretty much prostituted themselves to the dimes, the dollar bills of the titans of industry, like Ford, Rockefeller, Carnegie. Well, Yale University is the best example. It's been totally taken over by the Rockefellers to serve the Rockefellers in its diabolical purposes for mind control and behavior control and social engineering and wokeism. Now, the Bronfman family, I talk about the Bronfman family, and Bronfman family invested heavily into Time Warner, which is headquartered in Rockefeller Center. It was took over the former Esso building, the former Standard Oil building. They since moved out. They moved up to, I believe they're up in Columbus Circle. But the former Esso building, which was Standard Oil building, was used by Time Warner. But if you knew the history there, Time Warner merged with CNN, and there was a merger there with AOL online, AOL services, internet services. I'm not sure what happened to AOL. It kind of just disappeared from the landscape. But the Bronfman family invested heavily into that Time Warner media company. So Rockefeller Center is the capital of big media. It was always the capital of the motion picture industry. Financial capital, the financial bosses. And there was a meeting at the Waldorf Astoria in post-World War II. All the studio heads met in the Waldorf Astoria at Park Avenue, New York City. Same building occupied by Murder Incorporated. They met for one purpose, to smash the communists out of the motion picture industry. Well, the point is they met on New York City in the Waldorf Astoria, run by the Astor family, now owned by the Hilton chain, which is, well, it's all run by the Rockefellers through their Blackstone Corporation. But Time Warner, Time Magazine, Life Magazine, was run by Henry Luce. Skull and Bones, Bonesman Henry Luce. Out of Rockefeller Center, Time Life publishing empire was, the Time Life building in Rockefeller Center, built in 1957, which is now the headquarters for the Clinton Foundation. Does it strike you odd that the Clintons would come from the backwaters of Arkansas and be perched right in heart of Rockefeller, the House of Rockefeller? Doesn't that strike you as suspicious? And their house in Chappaqua is on Bedford Road, which is down the street from David Rockefeller. Well, he passed. David Rockefeller's home, about 5 miles down the street. Doesn't that strike you as odd? That brings up the murder of Vince Foster. I'm not going to get too much in that, but I want to say that Henry Luce was the one who bought the Zapruder film and hid the film from the American public. They hid the motion of the film. They did publish still pictures in Life magazine, but the motion picture wasn't brought out of hiding. It was locked away in Time Life vaults across from Standard Oil headquarters. And it was pried out of those vaults. It wasn't really, the public didn't really see it until the House Assassination Committee got the picture, got the film out. It suggested President Kennedy was shot from the front. At least that was the fatal shot, which that would conflict with the so-called official version of the Warren Commission. Well, it was nothing but a whitewash. Now, there's another connection here with the Bronfmans, and that is a man named Phil Johnson, who was an architecture / super creative guy, artist, well involved in the history of the MoMA Museum in New York, well, it's part of Rockefeller Center complex too. Of course, MoMA was built by the Rockefellers, Museum of Modern Art. And Phil Johnson was one of their artists. And with Phil Johnson, when George Morenchid died, he was shot. His head was shot off by a shotgun blast. When the House Assassination Committee knocked on his door, he was dead. He had his head blown off by a shotgun blast. George Morenchid was Oswald's best friend. He befriended Oswald in the months leading up to the JFK assassination. Of course, a lot connects him, including Warren Commission document 533. George was working for Nelson Rockefeller, basically. George was being financed by Nelson Rockefeller. George Morenchid's It's right in Warren Commission document 533. I'm not making it up. But George had Phil Johnson's phone number in his address book when George Montreal was assassinated, was found dead. He had Phil Johnson's name in his phone. Now here's a guy associated with Oswald had Phil Johnson's phone number. Well, here's the thing. Phil Johnson designed the Seagram building and Park Avenue, which is just a couple doors down from the Waldorf Astoria, headquartered for Murder Incorporated. And of course, the Bronfman family pretty much owned Seagram 7. I mean Seagram, not Seagram 7. Seagram 7 was a licensee. But the Seagram, which during Prohibition, see, were all the gangsters. Waldorf Astoria, also the New York Central building, Park Avenue. Seagram buildings on Park Avenue. Phil Johnson also designed a building which is on 52nd Street, which is called the Rockefeller House. You could Google that. It's just basically a square building made out of glass. Not very big. The air rights thing got to be worth a fortune. But Phil Johnson also designed the Memorial in Dealey Plaza, which is basically a square building made out of concrete. You can walk through it, you know, to a memorial to JFK, who was assassinated in Dealey Plaza. So let me summarize this here. This is the Bronfman headquarters. In 1926, this was Gangster Central. The Bronfmans were smuggling Seagram alcohol into the United States and made a fortune. Because the United States, because of Prohibition, customers are paying premium dollar and gangsters are making premium money. See, that was another thing too. That's why all these gangsters were in the Waldorf Astoria in these plush hotels, because the richest people in the world slept in these hotels. And the Astors and the Vanderbilt, they were bringing these people the finest spirits on the planet, the finest alcohol beverages on the planet. You're not going to feed these people bathtub gin. And that's what the gangsters were doing. They were running emporiums of vice for the high Protestants. The Assers, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the list goes on and on and on. You know, does it strike you out that the Protestants were the landlords for the Italian crime lords? Remember, Bobby Kennedy in The Enemy Within, page 6, talked about the Italian crime bosses, Albert Anesthesia, the High Lord Executioner. He was he was executed himself only 2 blocks away from Nelson Rockefeller's office on 55th Street. And see, when the Rockefellers were building Rockefeller Center, they were using these gangsters as their labor enforcers. So in other words, if anybody started talking about higher wages or bringing in unions or whatever, they were dealt with swiftly. They were met with swift retribution. See, the gangsters are working for the Protestants. That's the story, because this was a Protestant country. Now, Quebec was a little different. Montreal's a little different. It was a Catholic city, but the Bronfmans were Jews. Now, the other connection is to McGill University. They were the bosses of McGill University, and they were overseeing this MK Ultra experiment to develop weaponized Manchurian candidates to kill high officials, like President Kennedy. And McGill University, if you study the history, the Rockefeller Foundation, and this they celebrated for 100 years, for a century, financed the psychological department at McGill University. The Rockefeller Foundation financed the psychological department at McGill University that was doing the experiments at the Allen Institute, which was a psychiatric hospital. And these people are supposed to be philanthropists. All those people, those patients that went there for help or dragged there, were administered LSDs and all kinds of horrific mind control experiments, and they didn't volunteer for any of this stuff and didn't even know they were being subjected to it, other than suffering pain. these Rockefeller cabals members are not nice people, folks. Don't ever call them. The biggest lie in the history of mankind is when the Rockefellers declared themselves philanthropists in 1913. But anyways, being here in Montreal and well, you know, wherever you go in the world, you run into something connected with the Rockefellers. There's no city doesn't somehow have some connection to the Rockefellers. And McGill University is here, and like I said, the profits donated this building to McGill. It's run by McGill University, but these universities like to forget their dark history.